What's up, everybody? Welcome back to those of you returning. Welcome to those of you that are here for the first time. So today we'll be reading Matthew chapter 26. I'm reading from the NLT, the New Living Translation. I also referenced the Geneva Bible, the 1560 edition. This chapter is pretty long, so bear with me. We'll try to get it all done on just one video, so the video might be a little bit longer. So without further ado, let's go ahead and dive in. Matthew chapter 26. When Jesus had finished saying these things, he said to his disciples, "As you know, the Passover celebration begins in 2 days, and I, the Son of Man, will be betrayed and crucified." At the same time, the leading priests and other leaders were meeting at the residence of Caiaphas, the high priest, to discuss how to capture Jesus secretly and put him to death. But not during Passover, they agreed, or there will be a riot. Meanwhile, Jesus was in Bethany at the home of Simon, a man who had leprosy. During supper, a woman came in with a beautiful jar of expensive perfume and poured it over his head. The disciples were indignant when they saw this. "What a waste of time," they said. "What a waste of money," they said. "She could have sold it for a fortune and given the money to the poor." But Jesus replied, "Why berate her for doing such a good thing to me? You will always have the poor among you, and I will not be here with you much longer. She had poured this perfume on me to prepare my body for burial. I assure you, wherever the good news is preached throughout the world, this woman's deeds will be talked about in her memory." Then Judas Iscariot, one of the 12 disciples, went to the leading priests and asked, "How much will you pay me to betray Jesus to you?" And they gave him 30 pieces of silver. From that time on, Judas began looking for the right time to place to betray Jesus. So the fact that it's 30 pieces of silver, that was prophesied before, right? In the Old Testament, it was described that pretty much the Messiah is going to get betrayed for 30 pieces of silver. Let's continue. On the first day of the festival of unleavened bread, the disciples came to Jesus and asked, "Where do you want us to prepare the Passover supper?" Again, so unleavened bread, there's a lot of different traditions of what was happening, during the Jewish times back in the day, the Passover. We're going to actually learn about that, later on when we read the Old Testament of what the Passover means and stuff like that. But just as of right now, just know that it's a very major holiday for them, right, for the Jews at the time, and still I think to this point. So they're getting ready for this Passover celebration, right? Let's continue. As you go into the city, he told them, "You will see a certain man. Tell him, the teacher says, 'My time has come, and I will eat the Passover meal with my disciples at your house.'" So the disciples did as Jesus told them and prepared the Passover supper there. When it was evening, Jesus sat down at the table with the 12 disciples. While they were eating, he said, "The truth is, one of you will betray me." Greatly distressed, one by one they began to ask him, "I'm not the one, am I, Lord?" He replied, "One of you who is eating with me now will betray me. For I, the Son of Man, must die, as the Scriptures declared long ago. But how terrible it will be for my betrayer! Far better for him if he had never been born." Judas, the one who would betray him, also asked, "Teacher, I'm not the one, am I?" And Jesus told him, "You have said it yourself." So one thing that I want to point out here, right, in the older translation, both the other disciples and Judas referred to him as master, right? Here, however, the disciples in this translation, the other disciples refer to him as Lord. They're asking him, "Is it going to be me, Lord? Like, am I the one to betray you?" However, Judas is the only one that says, "Teacher, I'm not the one, am I?" Right? So while the other ones are proclaiming that he is Lord, Judas is only referring to him, thinking of him just as a teacher. And then Jesus obviously tells him, "You have said it yourself." As they were eating, Jesus took a loaf of bread and asked God's blessing on it. Then he broke it in pieces and gave it to his disciples, saying, "Take it and eat it, for this is my body." And he took a cup of wine and gave thanks to God for it. He gave it to them and said, Each of you drink from it, for this is my blood, which seals the covenant between God and his people. It is poured out to forgive the sins of many. Mark my words, I will not drink wine again until the day I drink it with you in my Father's kingdom." Then they sang a hymn and went out to the Mountain of Olives. All right, so the covenant here right? In the old translation, it says this is like the New Testament, right? Between God and his people, this is the New Testament. Here it says the covenant. I think the meaning is pretty much the same, but covenant is something that cannot be broken. As I mentioned in the earlier videos, God made a covenant with Noah, right, after the flood, that he will never flood the earth again, right? So the covenant is something that God makes with us that cannot be broken. So he's here saying that God has made the new covenant with the people, saying that their sins are forgiven through my blood. Jesus predicts Peter's denial. So tonight, all of you will desert me, Jesus told them. For the scriptures say, God will strike the shepherd, and the sheep of the flock will scatter. But after I have been raised from the dead, I will go ahead of you to the Galilee and meet you there. Peter declared, even if everyone else deserts you, I never will. Peter, Jesus replied, the truth is, this very night, before the rooster crows, you will deny me 3 times. No, Peter insisted, not even if I have to die with you, I will never deny you. And all the other disciples vowed the same. Jesus prays at Gethsemane. Then Jesus brought them to an olive grove called Gethsemane, and he said, sit here while I go ahead and pray. So he took Peter and Zebedee's 2 sons, James and John, and he began to be filled with anguish and deep distress. He told them, my soul is crushed with grief to the point of death. Stay here and watch with me. He went on a little further and fell face down on the ground, praying, my Father, if it is possible, let this cup of suffering be taken away from me. Yet I want your will, not mine. Right? So again, this is kind of showing the human part of Jesus. Yes, we know that he is God in the flesh, right? But yet he's still in the flesh at this moment. And like I mentioned before, he experienced all the things that people do, right? That is why he's going to be the judge of all the people, because he went through it. He lived the life of a man, right, from birth. He experienced the pain, he experienced the betrayal, he experienced love and sadness and grief and all the other, and joy and happiness, right? All the other emotions that humans have, he experienced and went through all of that. So he knows how we feel. However, he lived the entire life without sin, right? And here you can see he's, crying out to God, to his Father. He's like, please, if you can take this cup of suffering away from me, please take it away. However, your will and not my will be done. All right, let's continue. Then he returned to the disciples and found them asleep. He said to Peter, couldn't you stay awake and watch with me even 1 hour? Keep alert and pray, otherwise temptation will overpower you. For though the spirit is willing enough, the body is weak. Again he left them and prayed, my Father, if this cup cannot be taken away until I drink it, your will be done. He returned to them again and found them sleeping, for they just couldn't keep their eyes open. In this older translation it said because their eyes are heavy, but pretty much same thing. So he went back to pray the 3rd time, saying the same thing again. Then he came to the disciples and said, still sleeping? Still resting? Look, the time has come. I, the Son of Man, am betrayed into the hands of sinners. Up, let's be going. See, my betrayer is here. So one thing that I kind of want to point out, I think personally it's kind of important, right? Jesus prayed here 3 times for the same thing, and then he prayed no more about it, right? And I've heard it before, and I think it's kind of important that if you pray 3 times, and if God hasn't answered your prayer yet, obviously wait. Maybe the time is not right, and just have faith in God that he knows what he's doing better than what you understand or what you think should happen to you, right? I don't know why it sticks out to me. I just thought I'd point it out to you guys as well, that he prayed 3 times about the same thing. However, every time he said, your will, not my will, be done. All right, let's continue. And even as he said this, Judas, one of the 12 disciples, arrived with a mob that had armed with swords and clubs. So in this translation, the older translation, says with swords and staffs. They had been sent out by the leading priests and other leaders of the people. Judas had given them the prearranged signal. You will know which one to arrest when I go over and give him the kiss of greetings." So Judas came straight to Jesus. "Greetings, teacher," he exclaimed, and gave him the kiss. Jesus said, "My friend, go ahead and do what you have come for." Then the others grabbed Jesus and arrested him. One of the men with Jesus pulled out the sword and slashed off an ear of the high priest's servant. All right, so later in the other gospel books, you will see that it was Peter that did it, and Jesus actually picks up the ear and heals it back onto the man's head. Once we read that, I will kind of go into the significance of it then, right? But again, that's going to be in one of the other disciples, or one of the other books. All right, but it's not mentioned here, so let's continue. "Put away your sword," Jesus told him. "Those who use the sword will be killed by the sword. Don't you realize that I could ask my Father for thousands of angels to protect us, and he would send them instantly?" So here it says thousands. In the older translation it says, "Don't you know I could ask my Father for 12 legions of angels?" Right? And I believe a legion is 1,000, according to the Roman military. "But if I did, how would the scriptures be fulfilled that describe what must happen now?" Then Jesus said to the crowd, "Am I some dangerous criminal that you have come armed with swords and clubs to arrest me? Why didn't you arrest me in the temple? I was there teaching every day. But this is all happening to fulfill the words of the prophets as recorded in the scriptures." At that time, all the disciples deserted him and fled. Right? He said that God will strike the shepherd and the sheep of the flock will be scattered. Right? So here you see the disciples scattering. Jesus before the council. Then the people who had arrested Jesus led him to the home of Caiaphas, the high priest, where the teachers of religious law and other leaders had gathered. Meanwhile, Peter was following far behind and eventually came to the courtyard of the high priest's house. He went in, sat with the guards, and waited to see what is going to happen to Jesus. Inside, the leading priests and the entire high council were trying to find witness who would lie about Jesus, so they could put him to death. But even though they found many who agreed to give false witness, there was no testimony they could use. Finally, 2 men were found who declared, "This man said, I am able to destroy the temple of God and rebuild it in 3 days." Right? So they're thinking of the physical temple, the second temple that they had in Jerusalem at that time, right? So they're thinking that he will be able to destroy that temple and rebuild it with 3 days. He's saying that I am the temple of God. Once this is destroyed, I will rebuild it in 3 days, which I will rise in 3 days, rise from the dead. Then the high priest stood up and said to Jesus, "Well, aren't you going to answer these charges? What do you have to say for yourself?" But Jesus remained silent. Then the high priest said to him, "I demand, in the name of the living God, that you tell us whether you're the Messiah, the Son of God." Jesus replied, "Yes, it is as you say. And in the future you will see me, the Son of Man, sitting at God's right hand in a place of power and coming back on the clouds of heaven." Then the high priest tore his clothing and to show his horror, shouting, "Blasphemy! Why do we need other witnesses? You have all heard this blasphemy. What is your verdict?" So it's funny that the high priest is asking him, like, "Tell us right now. Like, I demand you to tell us whether you are the Messiah, the Son of God." And Jesus tells him, "Yes, I am. I am as you say I am. And you will soon see me, right, in heaven coming down in the clouds of heaven." And that, of course, obviously he yelled out blasphemy and stuff like that. "Guilty," they shouted. "He must die." Then they spit in Jesus' face and hit him with their fist, and some slapped him, saying, "Prophesy to us, you Messiah, who hit you that time?" So in this translation it said that they spat in his face and they hit him with their fist, but it doesn't say that they slapped him. It said that they smited him with their staffs, right? So beat him with sticks pretty much, right? Saying, "Prophesy to us, you Messiah, who hit you that time?" Right? So here it all kind of like begins, right? The beatings and the horrible things that are to follow. Peter denies Jesus. Meanwhile, as Peter was sitting outside in the courtyard, a servant girl came over and said to him, "You are one of those with Jesus the Galilean." But Peter denied it in front of everyone. "I don't know what you're talking about," he said. Later, out by the gate, Another servant girl noticed him and said to those standing around, "This man was Jesus of Nazareth." Again Peter denied it, this time with an oath. "I don't even know the man," he said. A little later some other bystanders came over to him and said, "You must be one of them. We can tell by your Galilean accent." Peter said, I swear by God, I don't know the man." And immediately the rooster crowed. Suddenly Jesus' words flashed through Peter's mind before the rooster crows. "You will deny me 3 times. And he went away, crying bitterly. Anyways, guys, so that's it for chapter 26. I kind of stopped a few times to point out a couple of things, but thank you for sticking through. Hopefully I will see you all on chapter 27. As always, I love you. God bless you and your families. Take care.